to what I'm going to talk about for JCAPS. So JCAPS, when we think of the Artemis program and getting that first woman to the moon, so JCAPS actually plays a major role. We're the prime contractor as the integrator for all of the programs, putting the rockets together. So we're down at the Kennedy Space Center. We do the assembly, the integration, testing of all of the hardware, and then also we'll be involved in the recovery. So a tremendous amount of innovation and work behind the scenes.
And just before we go to Bob, what's the next breakthrough for JCAPS that you're already thinking about beyond Artemis?
So when we think of what's happening already, working on Gateway for the moon, and also thinking about what we're going to do for inhabiting the moon and some of those next steps. And a lot of the work that JCAPS does, so I know you didn't want us doing advertising, but you're right. Not a lot of people know about JCAPS, 55,000 employees around the globe, but we do have 20,000 that work within our government services business and 6,000 that work at NASA. And a lot of the work we do is the research and development behind the scenes. You don't hear a lot about us, but we're back there.
Thank you. Bob, Lockheed Martin, long-storied, you have a mic there? Yeah, right there. Long-storied company in aerospace and defense. Tell us what Lockheed's doing in your, what do you call it? You call it Skunk Works or Black Lab or something like that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Skunk Works is just one component of it. Facilities in Denver and Colorado, Waterton and all is vast. And when you think of space, I'm not advertising, but it is Lockheed Martin. There isn't any component we're not involved with. And it's all because of, and I'll use your term collaboration, maybe a little more significant, partners. How many partners and capacity can we bring into the game? That's really how we're going to get the most bang for the buck. And UAE is a perfect example of it. We've been running partnerships here. We run a space fellowship training program where we take engineers in here from UAE who we mentor, we bring into the space program. I remember Dr. Hadi when he was first stood up the UAE Space Agency 8 years ago, and UAE made the commitment to go to Mars. I felt embarrassed because I asked him a question. I said, well, when are you going to have an astronaut in space? And he said, and this was at Khalifa University, a big crowd, that's not our intent. We just want to get involved. And afterwards I talked to him, but sir, now you're part of that community. And lo and behold, we have Emirati astronauts. And so that's just indicative. I think what Lockheed Martin does the best is partnership with other government agencies, other countries, other commercial entities. And that's what we're all going to need to get the most bang for the buck and reach the objectives we're all looking for in space, Danny.
So you're more of a facilitator. Lockheed spends a lot of time
facilitator? No, a leader in
partnership, facilitating other partners is what I meant to say. Go ahead, Alan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Alan Herbert. I'm general manager of StarLab Oasis, which is a subsidiary of NanoRacks. And NanoRacks has been around for a while. We're a small entrepreneurial company, commercial space company, they call us. And some of the things we're looking at doing right now, we're already involved in a program called the Outpost Program, where we're working with NASA, looking at taking the second stages of rockets that usually go up and degrade and turning them into habitats. And then the other thing we're doing is working with Boeing, one of our partners, we have put the first commercial airlock on the space station. That's our commercial airlock, it's our real estate, and we're going to be doing all kinds of things through this commercial airlock. Also, we have just now announced last week, we are the largest owner of our own hardware in the space station, and we have put that all together and called the George Washington Carver Space Science Park, the first one in space in the world. And hopefully, you know, the ISS is not going to be up there forever, but it's still there. We'll have a whole space science park, George Washington Carver Science Park, built with different types of habitats. But the big thing is, we all know that in order for us to explore, in order for us to settle space, you have to have food. You have to eat. And so what we've done here in the UAE, we've been working here for about 4 years. I lived here for about 2 years. We started a company called StarLab Oasis. in Abu Dhabi working with audio, and I'll have more information to talk about that. But we're very excited because we want to be in our collaboration here. We want to be a leader in using Spacex technology for food security and helping with climate change in the Mesa region. One of the things I always look at when we're dealing is the Mesa region, which is the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. That is going to be one of the most powerful regions, I think, in the world when it comes to space. And we're really looking forward to being a part of that.
Thank you, Alan. I was a young intern at the Pentagon in 1983, and my supervisors brought me into a program called the Geopositioning Satellite System. And at that point, it was still a military application, but it quickly transferred to become a commercial application. And it's now what drives almost every app that we use on this phone or your other phones from other places in some way or another, for geolocation data, for your Uber to know where to pick you up, to where to get your food delivered. So this collaboration between government, private, and public is very, very critical. Dawn, say a few words about, you spoke about 6,000 folks at NASA. Talk a little bit about that public-private collaboration and how it leads to innovation.
Sure, and when you think about the collaboration, just being here again, earlier today, I was over at the exhibition center, listening to several panel discussions from folks from multiple countries around the globe, and listening to the different collaborations and the various pieces of information that come together. In light of your question, the woman from Norway spoke about the satellite systems. And so when we think of what we're doing in the United States, and we're taking that technology, some of this is taking today that the phased arrays, using the satellites, looking at the different payload systems, and what we can do for that now drives that all domain gathering of information, right? So it's land, air, sea, cyberspace. All of that is what's driving the technology in the future, and what we're going to continue to see with what started with you back at the Pentagon, really driving that.
And Jacobs is in the middle of that with NASA to look at those public-private partnerships and the commercial applications that can come.
So a lot of that is taking place today when you see the work that NASA is doing, not so much Jacobs as much as we're, let me start over. When you think of the launch of SpaceX, right? So behind the scenes, a lot of the technology took place in taking the Cape Canaveral Launch Center and taking that from being a government-only focused launch center to commercializing that and making that available for commercial launches. And that actually is some of the work that the Jacobs team did behind the scenes for the last several years.
So we have a space race going on right now, but now it's among civilians and some very big American companies who want to be the first to get all of us into space as tourists. That's a very interesting turn, isn't it? Khurshid, how is Boeing using space technologies, including satellites, to supply the public sector?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've always been a big producer of satellites for defense, commercial, and intelligence use. I mean, it goes without saying, stating the obvious, that space is a superb vantage point to be able to look at things like, movements in weather that could potentially predict natural disasters. So I think that, as the technology on these satellites just improves, so the sensors become more powerful, the energy sources become more powerful so that they can stay in orbit for longer. It just improves our ability to not only to predict these types of issues, but also to get to a situation where we can notify the right people, whether that's first responders, public agencies, to deploy resource where it needs to be. So yeah, I mean, I think we just see that as a natural development of our business. Absolutely.
Thank you. Bob, again, you're primary contractor for government and a lot of what Lockheed does. How does government turn to you to work with the private sector on space exploration? What are some of the lessons learned that you have from those experiences?
Well, I think it's one, our experience, how long we've been in the business, and it's striking to me what science fiction in space is no longer fiction. anything people can think
William
of.
Shatner went to space, right?
Yeah, we're launching 90-year-old men into space. We're putting Soyuz Rex, where we launched a satellite, it intercepts a meteor, takes samples and brings it home. Who even thinks of these things? So we're going to go make it happen. And I think that's what Lockheed's forte is. And when you think of corporate knowledge, and I'm a Navy SEAL, I was, so I'm not as sophisticated as my partners up here today. But when I first came on board the company, I'm out at one of our facilities and they were demonstrating to me their test and refinement. And they just built a satellite. We take that satellite then into this huge facility and create the space conditions. And sure as hell, they found a mistake. And they were able to go back and track 3 years later on a Christmas morning when a guy didn't come into work, another guy replaced him and didn't use the right screwdriver to plug that in. So that's how sophisticated, how detailed, how precision we are, and the experience we all bring to this effort to get it right with the quality we need that's going into space. So when we look at this space race, that collaboration is so important for all of us to get it right. And we're putting constructive platforms in space that benefit all of us. Moving that way outside of political realm, that's really going to be a benefit to all of us.
Well, to that point, Alan, it really is moving outside of the political realm, and this commercialization, this competition. How close are we to space tourism? How close are we to the average person being able to book a ticket like they booked here at Expo online and going up into space?
I mean, like everybody said, Captain Kirk, my STEM program was Star Trek. I don't know about everybody else, but we didn't have STEM programs when I was growing up.
Right.
And so Captain Kirk, he went into space, he was 9 years old. It's happening. Then the inspiration for the Spacex project, that is huge. And so you have 4 people who are not astronauts going into space. Then you had Richard Branson. And then I really believe that there's going to even be more vehicles that'll be going into space, that'll be commercialized. So I believe right now, it's starting now. I mean, this is the future is here now in terms of space tourism. We don't have to wait. It's going to be exponential right now. I think it's a little bit pricey right now, but I mean, many of you, if you know history in aviation, it was in the early days, it was expensive and only the wealthy could fly from coast to coast. Now you can fly from here on Wizz Air to Europe for $100. So there's opportunity right now where the price will go down, it will change. And I think what I really like about it is that it will give everyone in the world this opportunity, even emerging space nations who are really want to see grow and really want to see more of the companies partner with companies in Africa, in India, in Latin America, and in the Middle East. And that's what we did exactly.
Thanks, Alan. And that's really important. I mean, working as closely as I have with the UAE all these years, they're trying constantly to provide opportunities that are leveling and make opportunity available to everyone. In fact, it's a key component of this expo. Climate in all of this. I had to get my head around why was the UAE sending a satellite to Mars early on. I mean, literally 3 or 4 years ago. And then Sarah Almiri explained it to me very clearly. She said, Danny, the climate on Mars is very similar to the climate in the desert on Earth. And that satellite is going to test the atmosphere in Mars and compare data from those tests to data that we deal with here on the Earth, and look for new opportunities to deal with climate change on Earth. That was the purpose for sending this satellite to Mars. And I thought, that's amazing. What an incredible forward-thinking way of thinking about space exploration. Kuljit and Dawn, a few words about climate. Climate is so important. It's key to the Biden administration and everyone else right now. We're putting NASA as one of the key members on the space team or on the climate team in DC. Go ahead, Kuljit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, you're absolutely right. Look, the whole issue of climate sustainability is one that's obviously crucial for everybody right now. You know, one of the themes of the air show coming up is sustainability, how we can create that whole ecosystem in terms of airplanes that don't emit so much carbon. But yeah, if you go right to the beginning in terms of intelligence gathering, it goes back to what I said initially. You're putting powerful satellites up in space where we can actually start to see what's happening to the planet. And I think that the more we do that, the more we increase the consciousness of what's happening to the planet. Hopefully, it will really help in terms of getting everybody behind what we're all trying to achieve, which is obviously a climate on Earth that's there for our children and their children's children. So yeah, I mean, I think that absolutely the more technological advancements we put on satellites, the better data we're going to get to inform those arguments, I think.
And maybe just following along on that, in getting ready to talk today, I was looking through some old press releases and saw one, which was the picture that NASA in their weather tracking saw in advance Hurricane Ida that just recently hit the south coast of the United States. And when you have that advanced information and that tracking climate data, that allows individuals to prepare, to get ready if you have to evacuate, for government entities to prepare for these climate changes. But it goes further, and maybe I'll end this comment by going back to your initial comment about Mars and tracking and collecting data from Mars. And when we think about new technologies and new innovations with that Mars rover and the Perseverance, even just getting that to land on that surface, there was new technology developed by NASA at their Glenn Research Center in partnership with companies like Jacobs, like others in the room, to develop a new parachute in order for the landing system to take place. So you go from new technologies, innovations, to gathering information and scientific information and collecting data from the surface of Mars that can give us information for the future, for our own future.
The International Space Station is one of the most important examples we have right now of cross-border collaboration with so many countries involved in one way or another. Each of you jump in with a thought or two about how critical that kind of collaboration is for the future. Go ahead.
I think that collaboration, space is for everybody. And I think that kind of collaboration, even with the International Space Station, the Deep Space Gateway, Artemis, everybody should be involved. And that's why I always talk about the emerging space nations in the Africa, Middle East, Latin America. There's a time for them to all get involved. And I would like to see more American companies get involved and partner with the space entrepreneurs in these countries. I'm very much involved in the emerging space industry and looking at what's happening in these countries. And I think that will be a big factor for us to get a lot of other people involved internationally, because it's just not the USSR, China, Russia, or Europe. There's a whole lot of other people on the planet. And I think right now we have a perfect time for everybody to get involved. And I'm excited about that.
Bob, Dawn, want to comment on that?
I would say to your earlier discussion on being able to map the conditions here on the planet, we've also, because of the International Space Station, are mapping the space itself. We were always worried about debris. Now we're tracking it, knows where we're at, and if it's going to be a problem. And we're even thinking of how we're going to collect it and police the ground. So it's just across the board, the impact has never been more significant. And the space station orbit, which is designed for long-range exploration, all those platforms are now in play. They're verified, and we're building that experience that's really going to set us up for deeper, farther, better, so to speak. So it's a bright future.
And I'm going to take it from the point of diversity of thought. No one country has a lock on the best ideas or the best minds, right? And if we want the next generation of students involved in STEM and STEAM, if we want the next generation that's going to save the globe and not just save one country, we've got to collaborate. And you've got to take the ideas from wherever you find them, and hopefully, and not even hopefully, I heard it this morning when I sat in a session listening to speakers from lots of different countries. The collaboration has already started. We need to do more of it. We're doing more of it, and it's going to make it really awesome.
It's a fabulous and very critically important point in my mind and to my work. Do you find that industries all of a sudden leading in this regard, and governments are sort of slow to the table to come to that point of view, or are governments leading as well? I'm just curious your thoughts.
I'm a little biased. I think business is leading the way these days. I think we've stepped in, we've leaned forward, and we're ahead of it, which frankly, I think it's the way it should be. Government should be supporting, but as individuals, as those of us running businesses, of those of us those who are entrepreneurs, we need to move forward and make it all happen. And I think we're seeing it. It is happening. And it's really exciting, actually. And frankly, it's so exciting that, think about it, how many young people, because of what's going on with SpaceX, because of Lucy, Lockheed's Lucy heading off to space, all of that has really, I say this as a mother of 6 kids, by the way, it's energized them. I see my younger children are much more interested in talking about space than my older children ever were.
Interesting. Go ahead, Kajit.
Yeah, Danny, just to pick up on something you said, is it companies or is it government? Look, I think that the governments are going to have to be involved to give us the basis as companies to collaborate. So for those of us who work in the defense industry, I mean, that's, one of the most important aspects of it, right? If we're just not able to collaborate for various reasons around technology transfers, et cetera, it just makes that whole collaboration very, very difficult. So I think governments have to be involved. And look, I actually think if you look at space, I think it's a great example where there are so many divisions in the world of actual real meaningful collaboration. And you go back to the ISS. I mean, at a time when the USSR and the USA were such huge rivals, we were able to collaborate. So what greater example of that? And I think we should advertise these examples of collaboration for the common good going forward.
So I'm going to open it up to the audience here in a moment for some questions, but it wouldn't be a business-focused discussion if we didn't talk about money and investment, return, risk, and things like that. So what are the challenges that the American business is facing in being a leader in this wild blue yonder, or the darkness of space for the future? What are the challenges that you have, and where can government help more? And how is competition among your peers helping, hurting? What are some of the challenges? Don, I'm going to start with you because I know you have some very interesting perspective here.
Well, so certainly today, when you look at the ROI, the question is, can you justify it today for a lot of the new space exploration? And the answer probably is no for a lot of companies, but it will play into that future. Earlier, making the comment that at some point that price of that airline ticket or that space ticket will go down. But I also think it's incumbent, I'm going to give a little twist to this. And this really is something when we talk about the partnership with a government agency and business and making things affordable. There are a lot of new entrepreneurial companies out there preparing the hardware today more efficiently, less expensive, that can help drive down the costs. But there's another side to it. It's something we work on. It's intelligent asset management. It's managing the assets today. So for instance, at NASA's Langley Research Center on the East Coast in the United States, we've put in an intelligent asset management system to save literally NASA hundreds of millions of dollars over the life of the equipment on a multi-million acre site, right? With tons of equipment, tons of wind tunnels, tons of testing equipment. And if you think about the savings you can take, that can be reinvested, whether it's by a government agency or back into the community.
Got it. Anyone else want to comment on that from a business perspective? You, Kajit, you're a lawyer by training. I think you should jump in with a comment for sure.
Well, thank you for that, Danny. Look, I mean, I do think it's, if you're really going to take it to a business level, it's about defining what your markets are, right? So I think that for the low Earth orbit, I think that we're beginning to understand what the market is. And once you're able to do that, that's where companies are able to pitch ideas to investors. It's where, you can actually even start to understand what it is you're going to do. And I think it's fair to say that you're looking there at, tourism. We've seen the commercial crew, and that's something that's already started. But also, I think that the really interesting areas around manufacturing you know, what can you do in that space? And this whole cislunar thing is fascinating as well. So I think that's a place where you can do it. I think honestly, for the deep space part of the business, I honestly think that it's very hard for a commercial company to do that. You know,
so government has to lead.
Government has to really take the lead on that aspect for the moment. Yeah.
And are there more opportunities for governments to work together on those aspects of it, Bob? Given a classified world.
Well, I'll go back one step further. One of the issues we see is intellectual manpower, woman power. That capacity is critical. Lockheed Martin we're a company of 100,000 people, 80,000 are engineers, and the bulk of them are dedicated to our space efforts. Their retention and keeping them are critical. So now in this marketplace where the other commercial entities vie for that same people and other governments does, it's a dual-edged sword, so to speak. You want to collaborate, but you don't want to lose your people to them. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And so we focus on really how much of that capacity can we bring to bear, how do we keep it, and how do we protect it? And so that's one of the risks associated with collaboration. Boeing pilfers, no, I'm kidding. How many people here know? I'm being facetious, but all of us have that challenge. The demand is great across the board, and that's why some of these issues like artificial intelligence that can help in those regards is so critical and part of the government efforts that we're focused on.
Thank you for mentioning that, artificial intelligence. We hosted the Minister of Artificial Intelligence, His Excellency Omar Alama, this morning for a very small, intimate roundtable with our member companies. And he said some very similar things about the future is retaining and attracting this talent and giving it a place to be focused and a way to be focused. If the companies that don't do that with innovation are not going to succeed. And he said the UAE is critically focused on how to partner with industry to do that for the future. So it's very important. Go ahead.
And they're preferring our people there as well. I'll give you an example. No, it's an interesting, I think, an example. We run a internship program where we've brought in, I think, about 200 Emirati students over the last 8 years. We mentor them with one of our engineers. We give them a project to work. And so far, I'll give you one example. We had a few of them last year take AI and put it on a crawler device that they used fans to attach to an aircraft. So now this device inspects the aircraft for cracks, stuff. Brilliant. They even patented it, and Lockheed Martin has now bought it to use on our aircraft. Those engineers we wanted to hire. 2 other companies, one may be sitting at this table, hired them. So that's indicative of this competition we're all facing with. And here in UAE, where we have basically 1 million Emiratis, that competition for those kids out coming out, Khalifa University and all the other schools is tough. And retention's going to be even a tougher problem. So it's a very interesting dynamic.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a couple questions from the audience. My only rule is that you say your name, where you're from, and what you say ends in a question mark and not a long-winded statement. Do we have any takers? Sir, please go ahead. Stand up and say your name and your company and your organization and your question, please.
Okay. Marco Romero, space system engineer from Angola, working in the space program. You talk a lot about collaboration. We know that every space mission now relies on collaboration. But how far are we from an international roadmap for space exploration, where we have all those building blocks where each one can pick up or at least see in each level how they can collaborate. And in the end, the other part, on the other hand, on another dimension, our liability, the lack of liability on the space sector is a barrier on that development. We know you have props, environmental tools for illegal launch and other activities on space, but how can we police this dangerous activity. And last milestone,
That's 3 questions.
we are getting to benefit humankind. How the ordinary citizen understand all that investment that companies are doing on a space sector? How we translate that to the ordinary citizen?
How it impacts that citizen and why they should care and think it's a good thing. Right. Right. Yeah.
To benefit our lives here on Earth.
Thank you. Thank you. So the open architecture question, I think that he asked us in the beginning, and obviously we've reached some of that frontier with regard to medicine and vaccine development with COVID and everything else. But what open architecture in this field for the future? Collaboration across institutions, across companies, across governments in an open architecture. I think that's what he's getting at. Any thoughts? How soon that's going to come?
Well, you're seeing it in universities already. So it's kind of what I'm seeing is a bottom-up approach. Universities across the board are collaborating, sharing information better than the government agencies and commercial business does right now. So that may be the model, but it's going to be tough because at that point, then it translates into dollars, return on investment becomes a little more complicated. But I think there are serious lessons to be learned from that we can inculcate across government agencies and the rest of the union.
What about the risk question? Dawn?
So risk so I think some of it's already starting. I think the risk is maybe goes back a little bit to what we said earlier about governments cooperating, right? So you have the defense aspect of it. And at what point will that collaboration take place? I do think that's still several years down the road. I mean, I think there's some of it.
Yeah, as a former lawyer, I'll have a go at the risk.
Never former.
Okay, I know. You may be former, but not former. But look, I mean, it is an interesting perspective, right? I mean, you know, there's got to be incentive. I think what you're already saying is there's got to be the protection and incentives for people to go and innovate. And look, I mean, all I can say is that the only way that that's really going to be possible is by statute. And you know, harmonization of statute. So you know, a good example of that is cyber, right? I mean, if we in the US we've got protection of the Safety Act. We basically to enable us to do that. But when you try and do that in other sovereign nations that don't have the same protection for a contractor, it becomes very difficult. So I think that, yeah, it's got to be a regulation and harmonization, because otherwise it's just going to make it very difficult.
So Alan, I'm going to come to you on the fun question, the narrative. How do we convince the quote unquote, as he said, average person around the world that this matters in their lives?
Well, I mean, trying to explain to my family what I do is in terms of agriculture was really hard, but I really broke it down to them where they saw how the technology that we use in space, you have Earth observation, of course, helps with our agriculture, and a lot of different emerging nations use that technology on their phones. And then also we look at how when you're in space, you're in a limited amount of space, and all the technology you use to grow food, to produce food, you can use that same technology here on Earth. When we announced what we were doing, we had a lot of young people who would never get involved in farming or food production get in contact with us because space, I guess it makes it sexy, and they want to be involved. In my family, the last farmer was in 1974, pretty much. Now, I'm in 2021, I'm involved in farming and producing food. So I think what's happening now, and as you were saying the young people, this is where it's coming for. The excitement for me is that when I was growing up, there was only a couple of companies you could work for, and NASA was it. Now there's thousands of new space companies you can work for, and you don't have to be an engineer. You can be marketing, communications. You can be, now they're looking at music, entertainment, dance, art. I mean, there's all kinds of things that's going to happen in space. We're looking at a whole new environment. There will be a whole new language. It's going to be very, very exciting. And that's where I know when somebody famous goes into space, like Beyonce or whoever, I don't know, everybody will know this is happening. And just like the internet started as a scientific tool. We all have to remember that. Now look at it. People took it and changed it and made it into something that impacts our world. The same thing's going to happen in space.
Thank you.
Is Beyonce going? Do you know?
It's very fun. Yeah, she's going right after William Shatner. We're gonna end the discussion here, and I'm gonna ask each of the panelists to give me one point, one big idea, if you will. We're here at Expo. We're talking about the future. What's one big idea that each of you have, either with your company or just individually, personally, that excites you for the future about this sector, this vertical in space? Koji, one big idea for the future that you want to see happen, or you think is going to happen.
Yeah, look, I honestly think that we need to get into deep space exploration, and I think that a lot of what's been talked about here is giving everybody the ability to contribute in a way that they feel they're safe to contribute. That's going to take a huge push from government. So I'd love to see, an overarching treaty where people can come in, just as our friend said there, from everywhere around the world to contribute to that deep space exploration. Because I think the deeper we get, the greater our understanding will grow. And that's honestly, when we think about space, in my view, where everybody wants to go.
Thank you. Go ahead, Don.
I'm going to add the flavor of STEAM. We've talked about STEM and the excitement of youth, but when I think of STEAM, on Saturday, Lucy launched to head out to Jupiter, and she's carrying a poem from the Nobel laureate poet Amanda Gorman. And think about that. I just think that's awesome.
I dream of personal and individual travel to space. It's coming.
So you're going to be on one of those rockets soon.
Yeah.
I always thought of this rocket man, by the way.
I'm a professional parachutist. Last year, I had the opportunity to set the world record by jumping onto Mount Everest. We landed at 23,000 feet.
Congratulations.
But I want to beat that son of a gun and be the highest jump out of a platform. So that's my aspiration.
I think for me, I dream of a day maybe in LIE or someplace here where you take a private rocket up to low Earth orbit, and you take a private low Earth orbit rocket to the moon, Deep Space Gateway, and a private rocket down to the moon, and you go to a Hilton, you go to a Ramada, I don't know, a private company there, and the food that you eat comes from StarLab Oasis, which is based in Abu Dhabi.
That was advertising.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming today, and thank you to our friends and our partners here at the U.S. Pavilion and with the U.S. Mission in the UAE for the hospitality. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thanks to our team.